In this Sunday's Gospel, Jesus summarizes the whole of God's calling for us in life with those two great commandments we call the Golden Rule. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul and mind, and you must love your neighbour as yourself. That summarizes basically what God is asking us to do as human beings in our life. But once again, it comes from a potentially dangerous, bad situation that Jesus transforms into an opportunity to give us something good. Because once again, as we heard last week, the Pharisees are out to try and trap Jesus. This time, the word is used in the translation to disconcert, but it says one of them asks him this question to test him. It's the same word that is used for the devil when he tempts or tests Jesus in the desert. So we have to have that in mind. They're trying to catch him out, trying to test him and tempt him. And they think, well, he's answered all our questions or battered away all our specific questions. So we'll ask him a general one now. What's the greatest commandment in the law? So, of course, they want him to refer to the law that they follow. And of course, he starts off with probably what they expect. He says, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. So that's from Deuteronomy, that's from the Shema prayer. The Shema, the listen, O God, listen, O Israel, the Lord your God is one Lord. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul. So I'm just paraphrasing, but that's the prayer that the Jewish people at the time and still today will pray every day. So when he's saying that, they're probably nodding along. You can imagine they're going, yeah, we know that, we've heard that, we pray that every day, we know we must love the Lord our God with all our mind, heart and soul. So maybe he's playing it safe this time. Then he says, that is the greatest and the first commandment. So they're kind of like saying, hang on, wait a minute, there's more. What else is he going to say? And then he says, the second is like it. You must love your neighbour as yourself. Once again, it's nothing new, because as we hear in the first reading from the book of Exodus, the whole point of when the law was given to the people of Israel, that they're asked not to abuse the stranger and to treat the alien well and to love their neighbour. They're reminded that you were once a stranger in the land of Egypt. You were once a subject to slavery. You once had to suffer. So treat other people well too. Don't be like the people that treated you badly. So it's nothing new, but he's saying that these are the greatest commandments and that they are together. You can't have one without the other. So you can imagine those who were nodding along, saying, yes, we know we must love God. Perhaps what Jesus is saying is, you've got all these 627 commandments, something like that you follow in the law. But have you forgotten what underpins them? Have you forgotten why you follow those commandments? If they're not based on these two principles that are so interconnected, love God, love your neighbour. You love your neighbour by loving God. You love God by loving your neighbour. You can't do one without the other. So all those laws and customs are pointless without that love. And I don't know about you, I can be like this as well. I can go to Mass, as a priest, celebrate Mass every day, and we'll pray. And then you think, oh, I'm doing well. I've been to Mass and I've been praying, and God knows that I love him. And then as soon as you get out of the church, the first person you meet, you get really annoyed with them, and then you're not loving them as your neighbour. Now, there's a difference between liking and loving, but that's for another homily. Now, that's what it is. Pope Francis during the week called it practical atheism. He said those people that can go to church every day but then treat people terribly as soon as they've left the church, it's almost like they're living as if God doesn't exist, because they're not seeing God, they're not seeing Jesus in their neighbour, they're not loving God through loving their neighbour. And it's that's what it's all about, that love. But what is that love that Jesus is calling us to? Well, it's a high form of love. It's not just, being infatuated with something or the romantic style of love that pop songs talk about. It's what we call in theology agape love. That's the Greek word that is used for this type of love. And it just simply means to put the other person ahead of yourself. But it doesn't just stop there, because we have to remember in the other parts of the Bible it says that God is love. That's what we're called to imitate the love that God is, that Jesus shows us that God is through what he did. He lived, suffered, died and rose again for us. That sacrifice, that self-sacrifice, that is the type of love that we're called to. It's a difficult type of love, but it's a challenge and it's a privilege, and it's something that we can do with God's help. But we can only follow God's call if we don't lose sight of those two commandments together. And it's going to be so important, in my opinion, in the next few weeks and months, and it should have been important during this pandemic already. But this love of neighbour and love of God being totally interconnected is what is going to keep our society together in this next year or so. We've seen different things going on in politics, very topical at the moment, where perhaps the dignity of every human being is not being respected. That dignity comes from the fact that God created us out of love in his image. We are all children of God. Our equality comes from that fact that we were created out of love in the image of God. And so there is a mark of the image of God in each one of us. We have to try and see that reflection of God, and that means we'll have more opportunity to do that, because it can be, well, that's what we're called to do, to love God through the poor, through people who are suffering. That's where we will more obviously see God, and that's where our opportunity to love comes from. But we can't lose sight that it's God in those situations. There are so many people that do love their neighbour as themselves, even though they don't believe in God. But they would be so much more nourished, so much more energised and sustained and supported in their life once they recognise that that love has its roots in God. So that's our challenge, and that is our hope in these coming months. That society can wake up, we as individuals can wake up, and that we can love God with all our heart, all our soul, and all our mind, and love our neighbour as ourselves.